Became a Prostit-te to a wealthy older woman from my bar for cash to cover my gambling losses. Now I'm trapped in secrecy and shame. So this has been going on for over a month now, but the full weight of the situation only crashed down on me today. I'm 31, and honestly, life has been rough these days. I used to have things going for me in my mid-20s, but alcohol and a gambling habit have pretty much blitzed any stability I had. Now, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, juggling 2 jobs, single, no kids, but still deep in debt. At least I squirreled away some savings into retirement accounts back in the day. I might have to take a loan against it soon just to mop up the mess, but I'm holding out for now. There's this bar right across the street from my apartment that I go to. The regulars there run the full age spectrum. Youngest is 21, oldest is 75. Most of them are friends or at least people I know well enough. Now, Lynn is one of my good friends from the bar, and she's in her 50s. Honestly, she's beautiful, especially for her age. There isn't a single guy at the bar that wouldn't jump at the chance to take her home if she let them. Lynn lives close by, so we started hanging out outside the bar every so often, and it's always a blast when it's just the 2 of us. Some of her friends, though. Now, they're a different story. Most of her friends are older, single women, big drinkers, loud talkers, and then there's Barb. I'll never forget the first time Lynn introduced us. Barb made it very clear, right from the jump, that she was into me. The problem is, she's older than my mom, and there's just nothing there for me. Zero attraction. But Barb lives close too, and she started showing up at the bar all the time, always sitting right next to me. It was fine at first, she'd buy me drinks, kinda nice, honestly, but then she got clingy, always around, and it became impossible to spend time with Lynn without Barb tagging along. I started to miss the times when it was just Lynn and me. Still, Barb is a riot. She really is funny as hell and a good time, but the fact she wanted me so badly was always hanging in the air, and it felt weird, especially since I was crushing on her friend. 3 weeks ago, I got this text from Barb asking if I could help her with Christmas lights in her apartment. She said I could help myself to her food and drinks. I was a little tanked at the bar when she messaged, and I just lost my last cash gambling, so I figured why not. Her building was new, super nice, luxury all the way. But her actual place? Unreal. Top floor. Massive. High ceilings. Huge windows. Stairs up to her bedroom. I couldn't believe it. I told her flat out how impressed I was, and that's when she started pouring out her life story. Up until now, she'd never really opened up, so it caught me off guard. But yeah, nasty divorce, still tangled up with her ex in court, 1 daughter is on speaking terms, the other isn't, she's brutally lonely, and then she says she's sexually starved, which she lets hang in the air. I told her I was sorry to hear all that while cracking open a beer, then started putting up her lights. We started laughing, getting tipsy together, really drunk for a Wednesday night, and I still can't explain what got into me, but when she asked if I wanted to shower with her, I just went with it. Didn't even have clean clothes to change into. There we were, showering. I wasn't blown away by her naked body, but for whatever reason, I got hard, and as soon as she noticed, she grabbed me. I told her she could touch me, but I didn't want to have sex. We ended up in her gigantic bed. Seriously, her whole bedroom is like its own apartment. We were watching Young Sheldon when she suddenly asked me, "What would it take for you to perform oral sex on me?" Without thinking, I said, $200 and a frozen pizza. She immediately responded seriously, "I'll give you $400 if you can make me climax." So, she pulled up her nightgown, and I ended up leaving with $400. I really needed the money, so I pushed aside any uncomfortable feelings and went through with it. A week later, Barb texted again, wanting me to come over. Of course, I was back at the bar, out of cash after gambling and half drunk. I went over again, and she asked if I wanted to have sex. I told her I don't have sex without a condom, and she tried to convince me she couldn't get pregnant, but I said that didn't matter. She was cool with that, then countered with oral for oral. It was awkward. I asked if I'd get paid, like last time, and she acted a little embarrassed, said she only paid me because she was so desperate that night. We argued about it for a while, and she offered me $50. I haggled and managed to get $75. God, that conversation felt like it lasted forever. I can barely even tell this without cringing. Later that week, I hit the bar with Lynn, for once without Barb there. It felt great. I mentioned how I'd helped Barb with her Christmas lights and man, her condo blew me away. That's when Lynn dropped the bomb. Barb is loaded. Like, multimillionaire loaded. Her ex-husband was rich, she inherited family land with her brother and they just sold it for a fortune. Seeing her house in pictures, holy shit, she's absolutely set for life. I started showing up at the bar every night, waiting for Barb to appear or for my phone to buzz with a message from her. But, right then, luck swung my way for once. I hit big on the gaming machines, so I could afford to ignore Barb's calls for a little while. But winnings don't last, not for me, and soon enough I was back to being broke, drunk, and alone. Then Barb called me up again and said she wanted to make a deal. Of course, I staggered over, and when I walked in, her apartment was dark except for the Christmas lights, and she was standing there completely naked. She looked at me and goes, "I need you inside of me, what will it take?" Cringeworthy beyond belief. I mean, I know nothing about how this works, nothing about rates, boundaries, nothing, except I knew Barb was loaded. So, I threw out $1,500. She laughed and said I'd have to last a really long time for that price. Ugh. Then she offered $500, but no condom. That totally threw me. Do women care that much about whether there's a condom or not? Why was that so important to her? I never expected my life to spiral in this direction, but it did, and fast. It all started with Barb. She had always been a presence in our social circle, but I never thought things would escalate the way they did. The first time, I almost couldn't wrap my head around the number she offered me, $800. Without flinching, she paid, and we spent the night together. I can't say much about the sex, except that she was clearly very satisfied. The next day, she texted and wanted me to come over again, for the same deal. 2 days after that, she upped the ante. She asked for the full service, a massage, oral, and an hour in bed. I half-jokingly asked for $5,000, convinced she would turn me down. To my absolute shock, she agreed. Within days, I'd made over $7,000. I settled my rent in cash, stocked the fridge with groceries, had my car fixed, and, for the first time in forever, I could actually buy Christmas presents for people I cared about. Oddly enough, being swept up in this secret hustle had cut into my gambling and drinking. I had less time and less drive to waste money at the bar or sit around sinking booze. For a moment, everything felt manageable. The guilt held at bay by the steady influx of cash. I walked into the local bar beaming. I saw friends, played some pool, and even snuck out back for a joint. For the first time in a long time, life wasn't hanging over me like a storm cloud. And then Barb walked in. She made her way around like she owned the place, greeting everyone, and then sat right next to me, right in front of all my friends. She kissed me on the cheek, leaving me stunned and blushing. My friend's jaws practically hit the ground. As Barb slid into our conversation, my heart pounded like I'd just sprinted a mile. My mind was racing, cheeks burning, and every word I tried to say got caught in my throat. Eventually, I excused myself to go home. Before I could slip away, Barb asked if she'd see me later. I shrugged and replied, "I don't know, hit me up." Then I ran. That was 4 days ago. I haven't been back to that bar since. I know my friends know, or at least have a good suspicion, of what I've been doing. At first, I comforted myself with the idea that if I told them I'd only slept with Barb for her money, they'd somehow understand. But the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. That would make it all so much worse. I'd have to admit I'm a whore, trading sex for cash. An alcoholic, gambling-addicted whore. Now, I'm left thinking I have to let people believe I just got drunk and hooked up with her for fun. That's all the shame I can handle right now. But the guilt is crushing. The secret is eating me alive. I can barely look at myself in the mirror. If I'd just been able to control my drinking and gambling, none of this would have happened. But this is the life I've made, one bad choice after another, until I became the kind of person I never thought I'd be. Update 1. About a year ago, I found myself in a situation I never expected. I started performing sexual favors for money while struggling deeply with alcoholism and a gambling addiction that felt nearly impossible to shake. It was a dark period, but looking back now, it seems like a lifetime ago, though the echoes of those choices still resonate within me. Barb was a key figure from that past. After our awkward run-in at the bar, the one that set so much in motion, she disappeared from my life for almost a month. I couldn't help but imagine she was out there paying someone else for what we used to have. Every day, the thought gnawed at me until I finally learned the truth. She had just been visiting her brother in Arizona for a few weeks. During those weeks when Barb was out of my orbit, I kept quiet. I never talked to my friends who had witnessed our strange encounter at the bar, nor did they bring it up to me. Suspicion hung in the air among us, but nobody treated me any differently, which made it easier to cope. The blend of secrecy and that unspoken understanding gave me the space I needed. One night, sometime late the following January, Barb reached out again. She explained where she had been and asked for help taking down her Christmas lights. I expected there was an ulterior motive, but to my surprise, she actually just wanted her lights taken down. It felt so mundane, almost comically normal. While we worked, I finally explained why I ran away at the bar. She told me that after I left, she told my friends she was just joking and admitted she felt pretty terrible for making me uncomfortable. Apparently, they all just thought I was being a spaz. I asked her to keep things discreet if we ever interacted in public again, but her response caught me off guard. She said she didn't want to continue our previous arrangement. She told me she'd gotten too caught up in the moment, did things she regretted, and ended up feeling pretty uneasy about it all. Barb suggested we could still hook up for fun, but no more exchanging money for sex. It made her feel filthy. I didn't want a friends with benefits situation. Honestly, I'm just not attracted to her, though I didn't say that out loud. Instead, I let her know that friendship was on the table, and that I was only interested in sex within the context of a relationship. I joked that apparently I could make exceptions for money, but otherwise, no. I also told her that if she ever changed her mind, and if I was single, I'd consider it again. That was something new for me, an openness shaped in part by reflections on my past actions. By this time, I was in the midst of a, mostly, dry January with friends. My mind was clearer, my temptations dulled. I had made a big career change, too. The new job paid less, but working one job instead of two, with far less stress, felt like liberation. I'm still a social drinker. I still gamble, but much less and with far less money on the line. After that, Barb reached out to me for services just once in February and once more in March. Now, when we run into each other at the bar, we just smile, share a few words, laugh about nothing in particular. We've both moved on from that weird, complicated part of our lives. At 33, I'm feeling genuinely positive about where I am. Maybe I'm not exactly where I wanted to be, and maybe I could have made different choices, better ones, in past years, but I'm finally happy with who I am, how I treat others, and most importantly, the direction my life is headed. Update 2. 2 weeks ago, a guy in a wrinkled blazer handed me a manila envelope while I was bagging produce. He said my name like he was reading it off a receipt and asked me to confirm the last 4 of my social. I laughed because I thought it was some stupid store audit thing. Then he said, "You've been served," and walked out with a bag of clementines. Barb's ex-husband is dragging her back into court over money, and I'm a name in a footnote. Dissipation of assets, lifestyle analysis, all those phrases that make you feel like you're about to be peeled and examined under a bright light. I went into the break room and stared at the soda machine until my manager asked if I was okay. I wasn't. I wanted a drink so bad my teeth actually ached. I went home and made tea like a 90-year-old and didn't sleep a minute. I called Barb in the morning. She knew. Her voice was weirdly calm, like she'd already cried and wrung it all out. She told me to come over. No candles, no Christmas lights, no music, just her condo with all the shades open and that big window staring at the city like it wanted to jump. She had a binder on the counter thick enough to level a table. Her lawyer had put it together. There were screenshots of lobby logs with my name timestamped, grainy stills from a hallway camera of my dumb face in a beanie, and one photo of me leaving with an envelope that I distinctly remember because it was the night she stuffed it with old 20s and told me not to blow it on the machines. I wanted to crawl under her couch. She said her ex's private investigator had been bored and thorough. She said her lawyer would try to quash the subpoena, but it probably wouldn't work. The thing that made me feel small and stupid was how embarrassed she looked. Not mad. Embarrassed. She kept saying, "I'm sorry," like she was apologizing for having ever needed me. I told her I wouldn't lie. I said it out loud because I needed to hear it in my own voice. I'm not tanked in a shower anymore. I'm not negotiating over a frozen pizza. If I had to go in there and tell them I made a terrible choice for money, then that's what I'd do. She nodded and poured black coffee into a wine glass, because she doesn't own regular cups, apparently. The deposition was in one of those offices where the carpet doesn't quite match the walls. They sat me at a long table with water bottles lined up like trophies, a tiny recorder blinking red, and a woman typing so fast it sounded like rain. Barb was there with her attorney, and across from me was a man with eyebrows that met in the middle. He started politely and then got that slow, syrupy tone, like he was spoon-feeding the word escort into my mouth. He walked me through dates I pretended not to remember and times I wish I could. He asked if money changed hands. I said yes. He asked what I did for it. I said I helped her with things around the house and I kept her company. He asked if the company involved sex. I stared at the condensation running down my water bottle and said, "Sometimes." He asked how much. I said I didn't keep a ledger. He slid a photo across the table of me in the elevator, hair wet, holding my shoes. I had to close my eyes for a second because it was absurdly on the nose. He smiled like he just remembered a joke. He brought up a text I'd forgotten about. Back in January when Barb and I were trying to be normal people for 5 minutes, I sent her a message saying, "I'm only interested in a relationship. Apparently I make exceptions for money lol." He read the words exceptions for money out loud and waited, like the lol was going to save me. My face was hot enough to fry an egg. I said it was a bad joke. I said a lot of this was bad. I said I'm trying to be better. The court reporter didn't look up once. After, I parked in a garage and got out of my car and threw up nothing against a concrete wall. Classy. I sat on the curb behind a dented Camry and called Lynn. Not because I had a plan, just because my hands needed something to do besides shake. She was at work and still answered. "Tell me where you are," she said, like I'd run away from somewhere. She drove over in 10 minutes, handed me a lukewarm bottle of ginger ale, and didn't make me explain. I told her anyway. I told her everything I hadn't said out loud to anybody. She didn't flinch. She smacked my knee and said, "You idiot," in a way that somehow felt like a hug. Then she made me eat a stale pretzel from a vendor outside like that was going to anchor me to the earth. Barb settled a week later. I don't know the number. What I do know is that a white envelope showed up at my door with a letter from her lawyer asking me to sign a non-disclosure about the deposition specifics and a check to cover my time and disruption. Their wording. It was more money than I've ever seen come from anything legal with my name attached. I stared at it on my kitchen table for an entire evening like it was a snake that could bite if I moved wrong. I walked to Lynn's place and handed her the letter and the check and asked her to tell me what to do. She raised an eyebrow, handed them back, and said, "Do what lets you sleep." I signed it. I deposited it. I didn't go near a bar that night. I booked a therapy appointment instead and sat in a waiting room with a fish tank and a stack of children's magazines because apparently my brain is 8 years old when it's nervous. I said sex and money and alcohol out loud to a stranger while staring at a watercolor painting of a canoe. It was the dumbest and smartest thing I've done in months. A small thing happened a couple days after the settlement that scrambled me more than all of it. I was leaving the grocery store and a woman stopped me in the parking lot and said my name. She had Barb's eyes. It was her older daughter, the one I'd never met. She told me she knew who I was because she'd seen me in a folder she wasn't supposed to see. She said her mom felt humiliated and she felt angry and it was complicated and gross. Then she surprised the hell out of me. She told me thank you for not getting up on that stand and turning it into theater. She said, thank you for not torching her mom to make yourself look clean. I told her I wasn't clean. She made a face and said, nobody is, and walked away with a baguette under her arm like we hadn't just said the quiet part out loud in a parking lot shaped like a figure 8. I saw Barb 3 nights ago at the bar for the first time since all this. I was nursing a club soda like a kid at a wedding. She had her usual shiny thing going on, big hair, boots, red lipstick that stands out from across the room. We didn't make a show. She clinked her glass against mine and said, hey, and I said, hey, and that was it. Lynn slid up next to me and bumped my shoulder like we were in on the same joke. Maybe we are. Maybe we're all ridiculous and trying not to be. I don't know what this does to my karma or my ledger with the universe. I know I haven't gambled in 2 months. I know I'm sleeping through the night without waking up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat and counting my sins. I know I'm weirdly good at putting up and taking down Christmas lights, if anybody needs that skill. The rest, I'm letting it be messy without letting it run me. For now, that's enough. Update 3. I accidentally started a business. It sounds like one of those Facebook ads where a guy with veneers tells you to monetize your passion, but mine is ladders and zip ties and not dying. It happened because my produce manager taped a fluorescent green index card to the community corkboard that said, holiday lights hung. Fair price. Sober ladder guy. He wrote my number crooked and underlined sober 3 times. Lynn took a picture and sent it to 3 people and then those 3 people sent it to their building threads and suddenly my phone was vibrating like I dropped it in a beehive. It started with a dentist whose office smells like cotton candy and fear. He wanted icicle lights along his awning and a Santa clinging to the chimney like he'd got lost on the way to a CrossFit class. Then a bank branch manager who kept saying brand cohesion while I hung warm white bulbs around a shrub that looked like a meatball. Someone's aunt who lived in a townhouse with a cat that kept head-butting my tool bag like it contained tuna. I borrowed the store's box truck that normally moves pallets of onions and spent my mornings threading extension cords through gutters and my evenings drinking Gatorade on my floor because every muscle in my body had formed a union and gone on strike. The money hit my account with little ping noises and for the first time in a while none of them made me flinch. I bought a real tool belt instead of the broken canvas thing I got from a yard sale when I was 22. I bought a headlamp that made me look like a miner but meant I didn't have to hold a flashlight in my teeth. I bought a pair of work gloves that didn't have someone else's name sharpied on them. I also bought a graph paper notebook and wrote taxes on the cover like a grown-up. When you've mostly used money to punish yourself, spending it on a receipt printer feels like a religious experience. 2 jobs in, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize asking if I could take down lights in late January and could I please come by to give an estimate and also did I have time for coffee right now. I stared at it for a minute with that awful deja vu feeling. I typed who's this and it told me without the little typing bubbles, Barb. She added a smiley face, which she never does. It made my stomach do a weird roller coaster dip. Her condo was the same and not. The tree was still up but the ornaments were in neat lines on the dining table like tiny soldiers being mustered out. There were cardboard boxes with printed labels. Kitchen. Bedroom. Office. A new one. Donate. She had coffee and wine glasses again because apparently mugs are for peasants. She waved me in like we'd seen each other yesterday and not whatever the messy galactic timeline actually is. I'm selling, she said, like she'd cut off her own hair on purpose. She leaned back against her countertop and it creaked a little under her bracelet. Arizona. My brother's place. I'm tired of winters and lawyers. I didn't know what to do with my face, so I looked out the window where the city was pretending not to listen. That's big, I said, because I am a poet. Big and boring, she said. They make you sign forms for forms. The only exciting part is I get to throw things out. She nudged a stack of cookbooks with her toe. Do you want a crock pot? She was weirdly gentle with me. There were gaps where there didn't used to be gaps. We didn't mention January in a deposition room. We didn't mention a daughter in a parking lot. She asked about the ladder jobs and made me explain transformer wattage like she hadn't ever ignored every safety label in her life. She laughed at sober ladder guy for longer than it deserved. I told her I was proud of myself and didn't even choke on it. I measured her balcony and the weird arch above the big window because she wanted me to take it all down right after New Year's. No last-minute romantic gestures. She wrinkled her nose at herself and said it was a joke and I told her it was actually a pretty good one. We both accepted the lie that it was only a joke and let it sit like a polite guest between us while the city did its winter glare. On my 3rd job, a man in a camel coat asked me if I did inside installations. He was wearing cologne that smelled like the rich section of a magazine. He used the word companion like it needed capital letters. He did it with the same syrupy tone the eyebrow lawyer had used when he said escort into a little blinking recorder. My mouth filled with the taste of powdered sugar from the donut I'd shoved down in the truck. I told him I only do windows and trees. He smiled like we were speaking in code. He offered an obscene number that could have paid for new brakes and a decent mattress. I heard my own voice say, "I'm booked solid." I left his foyer and sat in my truck and timed my own breathing, which is something my therapist taught me that makes me feel like I'm inflating a bicycle tire but works anyway. I texted Lynn that I'd almost done something dumb and she sent me 16 knife emojis, and then the knife emojis turned into a voice message that said, "Come over for soup before you pass out on your floor." I went. Her apartment smells like basil and laundry. We ate soup. She put her feet on my legs and said, "You get to pick one holiday movie that isn't Die Hard," and I made a big speech about art and then put on Muppet Christmas Carol because I'm weak. Somewhere between the ghosts and that little rat who's always worried, she took my hand the way you'd take a fragile thing and rested it on her thigh, and neither of us commented on it. Her knee was warm. My brain didn't sprint toward anything. It just sat down politely and watched puppets sing. A week later, I was on Barb's balcony at dusk, wrapping the last line of warm white around a rail while my headlamp made weird halos in my breath. A security guard came out to smoke. He was new, except he wasn't. It took a second for the till to click. He was the pie with the bored eyes who'd studied my beanie on grainy footage and circled my name in ballpoint. He looked different in a uniform. He tilts his head, squints, and then he smiles like you do when you recognize someone out of context and your brain writes the caption a beat late. "Hey," he said, and held up his cigarette like a peace flag. Small world. It was the kind of line you hear in a sitcom right before a laugh track, but there was no audience, just the roar of traffic 6 floors down and the zip-zip of my cable ties. I said hey back. He asked if Barb was around and I said she was doing battle with a packing tape dispenser inside. He asked if I still worked at the grocery store and I said yeah, mornings, and ladder guy afternoons. He nodded like he was checking off boxes and then he surprised me by saying, "For what it's worth, I told them you were decent." It landed somewhere soft. He flicked ash into the night and elbowed the railing like it was an old friend. "It's all numbers to them," he said. "Hours in, hours out. They forget we're people." Then he made a face like he'd accidentally said something honest in a place where he wasn't supposed to and clapped his hand on the rail twice, like that made it casual. He went back inside. I stared at the empty spot in the air where his smoke had been and then I tightened another zip tie like an adult with a plan. On New Year's Eve, Lynn and I went to the early showing of Nothing. We watched people in puffy coats argue about reservations through a plate glass window and pretended it was theater. At 9, we went back to her place and watched the cheap fireworks through her blinds and split a root beer like we were 75. She leaned her shoulder against mine. My phone buzzed. It was Barb. A picture of her living room, half boxed, lights still on. "Come say goodbye," it said, no dots, no extra hearts, just that. I stood in Lynn's kitchen and looked at the little blinking bubble in my brain where bad decisions used to live, and it was quiet. I typed, "I'll come take the lights down on Tuesday. Safe trip." It took me 20 minutes to hit send even though it was 8 words long. Lynn didn't ask. She put the rest of the soup in my hands in a Tupperware and said, "Leave the bowl on the porch if you forget your keys." We kissed once at her door, quick and ridiculous, like something out of a movie that doesn't have the budget for a second take. It felt like biting into a grape that you were sure was going to be sour and it wasn't. Barb left a week later. I took down her lights with my headlamp and my new gloves and that sharp little pain in my chest that you get when something is over, and it didn't wreck you. She left me an envelope with a check for the job and a note on a torn page from a legal pad that said, "Get a normal coffee mug." It made me laugh in a way that made my throat hurt. I cashed the check and bought a navy blue mug from the hardware store with a chip in the handle. It holds heat. It's ugly. It's mine. I haven't been perfect. The other night, I walked past the machines at the corner bar and my hand did that itchy thing it does. I stood there long enough that the Rising Jackpots font looked like a foreign language. I pulled out a crumpled 20 and then I put it back in my wallet and then I went out to the alley and counted to 60 with my eyes on the dumpster until my heartbeat stopped sounding like it was coming from elsewhere. I went home and ate cold soup out of the Tupperware and watched that weird paint-peeling documentary Lynn swears is calming and fell asleep on the couch with my headlamp still on my forehead, like a campsite ghost. My therapist says closure is a myth we invented because we hate open tabs. She says you can have 1,000 windows up in your life and still get your work done if you don't keep clicking. I don't know about myths, but I know this: there is a coiled strand of cheap LED in my hands most days, and when I plug it in and it does its stupid little warm thing, people's faces change. They look up. They smile in that involuntary way that isn't for anyone's camera. I am in those moments, not an exhibit or a warning sign or a legal footnote. I am a guy on a ladder who can get down whenever he wants. I didn't know how much I missed that version of me until he showed back up with a box of zip ties and a tax notebook. If anybody needs their lights put up or taken down, I'm booked through the 15th, but I can make space if you feed me soup and don't mind that I hum along to the radio badly. If you're the man in the camel coat, no, I don't do inside installations. If you're the woman with Barb's eyes, tell your mom I got a mug. It's ugly and it works. That feels about right. Update 4. I lit a wedding with a $99 generator and stubbornness while the bride's uncle kept asking if I'd ever been electrocuted, like he was hoping I'd say yes so he could have a story for the cigar circle. It wasn't supposed to be my wedding. I was doing patios and restaurants now. Off-season string lights are apparently a year-round personality. But then the woman with Barb's eyes called and asked if I could make a barn look like it was expensive on purpose. I thought it was a prank until she said, "I know you like warm white and you hate those blue-white bulbs," which is a creepy level of specific to get from a folder you weren't supposed to see. We met at the venue on a Tuesday while the owner showed us where the GFCIs live and told us not to plug anything into the outlets marked beer only, which is a sentence they should print on t-shirts for that place. The barn smelled like hay and lemon cleaner and somebody's teenage memories. She had a swatch of napkins she cared about like they were sacred texts. "Soft," she kept saying, tapping the wood beams. Not twinkly romantic, just soft. I nodded and wrote soft in my graph paper notebook like I was going to test for it in a lab. I told her I didn't do inside installations and then I did inside installations because apparently romance is just electricity you can dim. I asked if her mom would be there like I was asking about the weather. "She's flying in from Arizona," she said. "She's bringing mugs." I almost laughed out loud. I told her I'd be there as a vendor, not a guest. "You still get A+1, she said, like that solved anything. "My fiancé thinks everyone should get A+1 because it lowers the risk of someone crying in the bathroom." I texted Lynn from the parking lot, "You wanna watch me zip tie electricity while men in suspenders say vibes?" She sent back a picture of her boots and said yes. The day of, the sky couldn't decide if it was going to weep or perform. The humidity sat on my shoulders like a toddler that wouldn't get down. I wore a tie over my tool belt because I am elegant now, apparently. Lynn showed up in a dress with a cardigan and the boots, hair up like she had clocked wind patterns. She handed me a thermos of soup and kissed my jaw while I was on the second rung and I nearly fell because we're idiots who forget about gravity. Then everyone I didn't want to see and had already accepted that I would see showed up. The pie/security guard waved at me like we were meeting on purpose. "Not smoking tonight," he said, patting his pocket in apology. The ex-husband walked in with a face like he was auditing the air. The eyebrow lawyer existed in a corner, talking to a napkin. I was winding a run of Edison bulbs around a beam when Barb came through the side door with Arizona on her skin and hair lighter than it used to be. She wore sandals and a dress that would blow up if the wind got ideas. She looked around like she'd left something on a counter and couldn't remember which home it was in. Our eyes did that two-step where you decide whether you're going to be adults or ghosts. We went with adults. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said. "You got a mug?" She smiled in a way that had a past tense. "6, she said, tilting her head toward a bag with handles. I overcorrected. Story of my life. We didn't hug. It felt perfect. At 5:13, the DJ plugged his subwoofer and his laser fog machine into the same strip as the uplights, because of course he did, and the GFCI took one look at our collective ambition and fainted. The barn went quiet in that specific way where 50 people inhale at once and pretend it's fine. The bride was 6 minutes away in a car full of Tool and hairspray. The owner started talking about the panel like it was a moody teenager. I said I got it, even though I didn't, because my body is apparently composed of this sentence now. I ran a line out the back door to my little generator that's technically for camping and emotionally for nights like this. I split the dance floor and the bar on separate circuits like a divorce settlement. The DJ made a noise when his fog machine stayed red that I think came from deep evolutionary history. I apologized to the fog machine with my eyes and told him he could have it after the first dance. We were back on in 3 minutes and the string lights hummed like a throat clearing. "Soft enough?" I asked the bride's eyes when she came to check with a bouquet strangling her circulation. She blinked tears back in a way that made me feel like I should look at my shoes. "Perfect," she said. "It looks like how it felt when I decided yes." I pretended cable ties needed me at that exact second so I could breathe without crying in a barn in front of men in bow ties. During the ceremony, I stood by the open door with a rag and that stupid navy blue mug because it was still too hot to hold without a handle. Lynn slid her hand into my back pocket like she was checking I'd brought my wallet. The pie nodded at me from the L like he was counting heads from habit. The ex-husband's jaw moved like it was chewing a list. Barb dabbed at her eyes with a napkin that said their names in gold like that would make grief and pride and regret match the color scheme. When the officiant said "you may kiss," the sun did that cliché thing and fell through the slats at an angle my headlamp could only dream of, and I didn't ruin it for myself by thinking the word fate out loud. The eyebrow lawyer cornered me near the bathrooms during cocktail hour and told me the lights were tasteful. His face didn't know how to make that compliment without also filing it. "Thanks," I said, with my hands in my pockets so they wouldn't punch a wall. He asked what I charge. I said, "It depends," and it felt like magic to say those words and mean dollars and not blood. At the first dance, the bride's uncle with the cigar face tried to plug a chocolate fountain into my outdoor rated strip because he is an agent of chaos. I intercepted like a defensive back and he fell in love with me on the spot. "You saved the chocolate," he said, sincerely, and went to tell 3 men named Tony that I was a genius. After dinner, Barb found me by the service door where I was pretending to investigate a knot because the feelings were running around the barn like dogs off leash. She handed me a small box, nothing heavy, just a weight in cardboard. "Don't open it now," she said, and it wasn't flirty or loaded, it was just adult, like handing someone their mail. I'm good, she said, like she had to practice those 2 words more than once in a mirror. I hope you are. I said I was okay, which is my version of good. We looked at the dance floor where her daughter was laughing into her new husband's neck, and it felt like watching a house catch fire in reverse. I danced with Lynn to a song we both pretended to hate. She put her forehead against my cheek and my brain did not try to monetize a single second. When the DJ cut the cake music to ask for more power for his fog, I shoot him with my mug and he grinned like we'd survived something together. Maybe we had. The ex-husband left early, which is the most charitable thing I can say about him. The pie helped me coil cords at the end and told me I should charge more. You don't get paid for the minutes it took, he said, you get paid for the panic you prevented. Then he flinched at his own wisdom again, like honesty was a bee he'd swallowed by accident. Back at Lynn's, we sat on her floor with our shoes off and ate leftover meatballs out of a bakery container with toothpicks. I opened Barb's box. It was a mug that said, "World's okayest installer," in a font that tried very hard not to be whimsical. I laughed in a way that made my ribs ache and set it next to the ugly navy one in her sink. It looked right there, ridiculous and fine. Lynn took my hand and placed it on her stomach like she was letting me hold a small, quiet animal. You did good, she said. My shoulders let go of something I didn't know they were holding. 2 mornings later, the venue emailed and asked if I wanted to be on their preferred vendors list. The city parks department called about winter, if you're still laddering. The woman with Barb's eyes sent a photo of the barn at midnight, all our lights still warm, everyone gone. It smelled like sugar, she wrote. I haven't gambled. I haven't even hidden outside to press my head against a concrete pillar and count. I keep plugging in strands and watching people look up like the world remembered to be kind for a second. There are still days where my hands itch and my brain suggests a shortcut to an old ruin, but then Lynn hands me a thermos and I go find a beam to wrap and the urge dissolves into something that doesn't need my attention. I'm writing this at my tiny table with a receipt printer humming like a content insect and 2 mugs that don't match, one of which announces that I am okay at what I do, which turns out to be precisely the bar I wanted to clear. I am a guy with a ladder who didn't climb into a window he wasn't invited into. I am a guy who can say no in a foyer that smells like expensive cologne. I am a guy who can say yes to dancing badly in soup. If you need your patio to look like a decision you're glad you made, I've got zip ties and terrible radio harmonies. If you're bringing mugs from Arizona, I've got shelf space. The lights come down and go up and come down again. It's not closure. It's a switch I flip, on purpose, and watch what happens.